Greetings and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ashley Tucker, Director of Marketing Communications here at IFMA. Sorry about that. We have an excellent discussion prepared for today, but before we dive in, drop us a note in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. And also be sure to like and share this video so others in your network can also enjoy today's session. Today, we'll be sharing highlights from the U.S. Military Veterans and Facility Management, a global salary and compensation supplementary report. This report is available for free in IFMA's Knowledge Library, and we'll share the link to download in the chat. It's my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. First, we have Jake Smithwick, PhD, from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, where he's an associate professor and graduate program director. We also have Assistant Professor Steve Call, PhD, from Washington State University. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jake.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Ashley, and thank you all for being here today. Steve and I, over the last period of time, had developed a number of reports focused on compensation and workforce demographics on different folks within facility management. We had a webinar a few weeks ago about women in FM. Now we're changed our focus to veterans in FM and kind of their experiences and work in the facilities management sector. So today's agenda, we'll get that pulled up here in a moment. We're going to go through the introduction, the overall purpose of the report, different methodologies. We'll talk about the age and experience and other demographics of folks who are involved with that. And that's kind of the overall agenda for today. A little bit of background about the attendees, or excuse me, about the presenters. Steve Call, as was mentioned, has a significant amount of FM experience, and we greatly appreciate his work and working through this report. So it's great to have Steve with us. Myself, Jake Smithwick, I do a lot of research in the FM space. I also was in the Air Force Reserve for a number of years, 6.5 years, in the Civil Engineering Squadron, 3 Echo 9. And it's always fun to go back to your roots, as it were, and to look at how we got involved in all this research. Our team at Simplar, we are a group of researchers that primarily work with owners and contractors. And really, fundamentally, our goal here is to develop tools and education that help FMs, owners, other folks get better at what it is their job might be. So there's different tools that we are glad to work with folks about that. Now, a little bit of history lesson here. The reason why this is relevant here that over time, starting in 2017, we developed the Operations and Maintenance Benchmark Report. That rolled into kind of a follow-up study with that in 2018. 2020 was interesting. We had COVID, of course, and we had a space planning report, which, by the way, we're currently updating as we speak. And from there, we developed a global salary and compensation report. And in 2022 was kind of the mark of just a lot of different geographic regions in terms of collecting the data. So we've got a lot of different things we've worked on, and we're glad to focus on veterans for this particular study. So why are we looking at FMs and what's going on is that, again, there's a huge transition right now due to an aging workforce. There's significant demographic changes. And my experience, having been in the Air Force for a few years, is that folks like that bring a unique skill set. And I think that as FM professionals, that we look to fill in the gap for that skill set. Veterans is an outstanding resource that we maybe have historically overlooked, and they can certainly bring a lot of value with that to our organizations. So with that said here, Steve, if you want to kind of walk us through the report and the details, and we'll take it from there. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Smithwick. Appreciate it. And yes, we're really excited to share some of our research findings as we explored this really critical population, which is our veterans here in the United States. And so the research that we'll be sharing, or the findings from the study, was really exploratory. So in other words, we were just trying to simply understand, what are the maybe some unique challenges that veterans are facing? What are some potential roadblocks that they might be facing to be more impactful to the FM workforce, which is struggling with challenges around retirements and retaining competent employees. So just a little bit of methodology about kind of where the numbers are coming from and how we got them. It really started with developing a survey that reviewed a lot of previous salary and demographic reports, and then input from subject matter experts to develop that survey and to refine it through pilot testing. It was sent to over 12,000 IFMA and even non-IFMA members with about a 29% response rate. Then, based on the results of that survey, follow-up interviews were conducted with military experts in different branches of the military to really get some additional insight in some of that information that we were initially seeing, and provide some context and help us maybe identify some areas that we didn't capture within the survey. And that was really helpful. And just as a foundation, when we say veterans specific to this report, it's really any individual that's completed service for any branch of the armed forces. And for this report specifically, it's those who are still in potentially still in active duty. And again, this is United States-based population for this study. So you can see where those respondents came from the survey. They have a pretty good mix between the different U.S. regions. The Northwest region, the South actually having the most responses, with about 150 veterans, followed by the Western U.S., the Midwest, and then the Northeast. So what we find is, as a percentage of the U.S. FM workforce, about 15% of facility managers in the United States are veterans. Interestingly enough, veterans as a portion of the overall U.S. workforce is actually only about 6%. So we're finding that the veterans are indeed a strong group within FM, which is good to know. So now we'll be talking a little about age and FM experience, and what a lot of these slides are showing is they're showing a comparison between those in FM who are veterans and those in FM who are non-veterans, and really just kind of understanding where there might be some differences, where there might be some challenges or even opportunities to help grow and support this important community. So on average, veterans are about 52 years old, with the non-veteran being about 47 years old. And there's far more veterans at retirement age or greater than 56 years old than non-veterans. So what the takeaway from this slide is really that this age disparity, you can look at it and say, oh, that's a concern. The veterans are so much older, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that veterans are typically entering the FM workforce after spending time in the military service. So that's part of the explanation of why veterans are typically a little bit older on average than their non-veteran counterparts. But again, it is something to note that we might have a higher rate of retirements coming from those who are veterans. Recruitment sources. So where are we finding folks to come into the FM industry, which is a really important topic? How do we attract the best, the brightest, and have a sustainable recruitment source to keep that pipeline open to address the needs within the facility management industry? And what we're finding is it really, anecdotally, we've talked about how important it is to recruit from the military, to bring in those folks into the FM workforce. But it has historically been actually a very small portion of facility managers that are being recruited directly from the military. So I'll back up, and I mentioned that 15% of all facility managers are veterans, but this is not the same as saying, are they coming directly from the military or not? And what we're finding is very, very few are actually coming directly from the military. And this hasn't changed. So it's not like it's, that happened more historically and now it's less. What we're finding is no matter if you were a respondent that was born before 1965 or after 1965, in essence, it's maintained about 2%. So about 2% of hires are coming directly from the military, transitioning from the military. And that's, I think, a little bit of concern to think that we're really under leveraging this really important pipeline of talent. I did want to show that compared to college, for example, historically, college is also a smaller portion of folks coming into the FM industry, but it's become it's grown pretty significantly over the years. So it's, as far as a contemporary recruitment source, colleges and universities are becoming a more prominent source for talent. And that's, I believe, because the industry has made it a concerted effort to really try to address that and really leverage colleges and universities. And I'm hopeful that as we talk about some of the research we find and how we can better leverage military, that this will start to change as well.
Steve, I think that's a pretty interesting point too here is that, and we'll talk about this a little bit more here, but from a recruitment standpoint, and the fact that, those with college degrees tend to be more recruited compared to those without, right? Being in the military and access to GI Bill and other resources like that is really quite a two for one, right? Being that, the military culture and life that comes with folks that, retire from the military, combined with the opportunity to get a college degree while in the military, would certainly position folks to be a very strong competitor for some of these positions here, right? So I think one thing this is showing us, right, Steve, is that it's an outstanding recruitment opportunity. We just have to know how to engage with folks that have that background here. So, folks, be sure to put your questions in the chat box here. We'll address them either at the end or throughout the presentation. But just kind of a interesting observation I had here, Steve.
Yeah, great. And this is really what this is a lot of interesting observations that will help us identify areas that we can either explore in more depth or try to identify ways to reduce or mitigate some barriers that are preventing these things. So excellent thought, Jake, and I appreciate that. And we'll be talking a little bit more about kind of those educational levels as well. So we'll even hit that point a little harder here in the future. This slide is showing, in essence, promotions or promotability. What are veterans being promoted more or less than their non-veteran counterparts? And what we're finding is, in essence, there's no statistical difference between promotability between veterans and non-veterans. Higher ages and FM experience levels do not appear to be expediting promotion timeframes compared to non-veterans and FM. So what we're saying is that even though a veteran might be a little bit older and might have even more FM experience, doesn't seem to be making too much of a difference. It just seems to be across the board that veteran status doesn't seem to make a difference as far as the speed of how quickly somebody's being promoted within the FM industry. Now we'll talk a little bit about kind of demographics as a whole. The gender mix is always something that we want to look at and see how that is playing into our FM workforce. This graph, it's a lot going on there a little bit, but what it's saying is that in red, the red is veterans. So only 4% of the military veterans in FM are women. So very, very small gender mix between veterans. And you can see that non-veterans, it's much broader. So 28% of non-veteran workforce, 28% are women. So, this gender gap may be due to historically small portions of women serving in the U.S. military. That's right. If you're pulling from a pool that historically has been underrepresented as far as women. Nevertheless, the percentage of women in active duty and selected reserves is growing. So we hope to see that number changing over time, especially as we make a concerted effort to recruit and support and retain and advance women in facility management. We recently had a research study on that. That report is available for free at the IFMA library if you're interested. And so this is obviously an area that we want to pay attention to and try to close that gap a little bit better. Employers. This is just kind of showing who's hiring veterans. Is there a certain employer or industry that seems to be hiring veterans at a higher level? Not surprisingly, government entities hire a high percentage of veterans. Banking and investment, which is, I thought, a little interesting, is about the same level as government. Why is that? We don't necessarily know the answer to that, other than we do show that banking and investment seems to pay a little bit higher than other industries. So that might be one reason why, government kind of intuitively makes sense. Banking has a little higher pay, so maybe they're able to track that. And then the other extreme is education, for example. Very low number of veterans are entering education facility management, and that could play as well on the low a relative low pay within the education field. Job function, as those of us in facility management know, facility managers wear many hats. And so there's various job functions within facilities management. And so we're really trying to identify what areas that veterans seem to be going into. And no surprise, the majority of military veterans and non-veterans consider facility operations as their primary job function. Of interest, as you can see, as far as design and space planning, very few veterans are going into that area, but as real estate as well. So this is an opportunity potentially to look at, where can I make an impact as a veteran? Obviously facility operations, but maybe some areas in real estate, design and planning are some other areas that could be of benefit if we're looking to how do we develop our skills to be able to impact the needs of an organization.
Steve, I think too that just kind of a personal story. When I was in the Air Force, I worked in emergency management, so planning for responding to disasters and different things like that. I mean that's got skills that's directly transferable to facility management. I mean that's a big part of what we do, and as we respond to that. And so I'd encourage anybody that is currently in the military or is thinking about retiring from the military is thinking about the types of skills that are transferable directly to facility management as a career, right? I wasn't a facility manager in the Air Force, but I have things that I worked on in the Air Force that would certainly be applicable as a facility operation, right? I mean, if you work primarily on like weapon systems, okay, that might be a difficult skill set to transition over to, but security, right? I mean, that's a part of what we do in FM. Mechanical systems, electrical. There's certain different types of jobs that we do that can be transferred to facility operations. And as we all know, right, FM is a very diverse field with a lot of different needs. And as we think about the skill sets we do have and how to move those over to a facility position someday, is certainly something we don't want to miss out as you think about towards the future. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Great point. There's a lot of transferable skills that can be coming from the military, and it's not a one size fits all, right? Facility management is fairly broad, and so there might be a specific skill set that you have that you may not even think about that could be really valuable to support facility management in an organization. This is a job search time frame, so it's really trying to understand, are veterans being recruited more heavily than non-veterans? Are they able to find employment quicker? This is just a metric that we look at. Interestingly, veterans are able to find entry-level employment about twice as fast as non-veterans. So there seems to be a huge demand for that entry-level facility management type role. This again might be partly due to higher experience levels. So, somebody coming out of the military that has years of experience, has those unique skill sets, maybe much more qualified and in demand for those entry-level positions. And it seems to level out between mid and senior level. There doesn't seem to be much of a difference, which in some ways is, I think, a good sign that if you are interested in starting or entering facility management out of the military, this is a great opportunity. Now we'll be talking a little bit more about education, as was mentioned earlier. Interestingly, military veterans in FM have similar levels of higher education across the board as a whole population. However, veterans are more likely to have a graduate degree than non-veterans in FM. So you'll notice 31% of veterans have undergraduate degrees compared to 45% of non-veterans. Now, that is a bit of a difference. It's not necessarily statistically significant, but it definitely is noteworthy that on average, veterans are kind of less likely to have bachelor's degrees, but more likely to have graduate degrees. Now, this higher level of graduate education amongst veterans may be a result, as Dr. Smithwick mentioned, of military sponsoring and funding opportunities for officers to pursue graduate degrees while in active duty, as well as the GI Bill education benefits. Degree majors, so veterans in facility management with college degrees are commonly majoring in business management, or engineering. So you'll see the graph to the right between veterans and non-veterans, about 33 to 34% of those with college degrees have their degree, their major in business. Many of them, veterans are much more likely to have a degree in engineering than a non-veteran. And while facility management is a preferred major by FM professionals, regardless of veteran status, veterans are less likely to major in liberal arts or architecture or design. So it kind of relates back to where are veterans focusing as far as their specialties within facility management. It seems to be in operations and engineering, and not in some of those design, liberal arts type focuses. So now we'll talk a little bit about pay. The question we had is, are veterans being paid similarly than their non-veteran counterparts? Are there any concerns to note? And what we find is veterans in FM receive similar pay as non-veterans from entry-level and early mid-level jobs. So you'll notice this graph to the right. The red color is veterans, and this dark blue line is non-veterans, and they pretty much track each other from entry level to early mid-level, and then non-veteran pay kind of stays flat for another, on average, 5 or 6 years before it then shoots back up and catches up to the non-veteran pay. So that was kind of interesting to see that. We don't necessarily know the reason why that is happening, but our hypothesis is potentially that veterans, because they don't have that undergraduate, many of them don't have an undergraduate degree or a bachelor's degree, that they're taking that time to maybe go back to school or get their degree, and eventually they catch back up to a lot of those other folks in the industry. So that could play a part in that. Responsibility slide. This is just showing is that pay difference, does it have anything to do with what the difference in the number of people that they're managing, the size, the budgets? And what we find is there's no major difference. And again, this is only looking at a snapshot of those folks. If you go back here in this area where we've got kind of this mid-level to early senior level where there's this gap in pay. So the question was, is there a difference in responsibilities? And there isn't. So whether you're a veteran or non-veteran in that kind of timeline of your career, manage about the same number of people, the same square footage, the same operational capital budget. The only difference is veterans are much less likely to have a bachelor's degree in that time frame of their career compared with their peers. Dr. Smithwick, did you have a comment that you'd like to share about these responsibilities?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that when you think about what folks work on inside of FM, veterans versus non-veterans, I mean, they're pretty similar to each other. But I think it brings to mind another perspective about the importance of transition and helping folks get involved in this career field as that. So I know one of the folks on LinkedIn here today, New Fall, has brought up that they work for Parsons. And at Parsons, they have a dedicated team called MilVet for supporting veterans as they get involved with the company, right? So I think about that. If you yourself are wondering, how do I engage these folks? Maybe you've hired some recent veterans. It might be worth it to have a dedicated team, whether it's from HR or other perspectives, people that can help bring these people in forward to the career and help transition from military life to civilian life, while still leveraging the skills and expertise they gained while going forward in the Air Force, or in the military, I should say. But Steve, let's talk about pay satisfaction and tenure for a few minutes.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So if you look at veterans again and non-veterans, we're just curious to know, is there a difference in pay satisfaction? Is there a difference in maybe tenure or different types of roles, whether they're contracted or in-house or part-time versus full-time? And so what we found is that when it really comes down to tenure, percent who are contracted versus they're in-house, there's really no difference between veteran or non-veteran type respondents. Nor is there much of a difference in level of satisfaction, even by entry level. So entry level, mid-level, senior level, no major difference. There appears to be general contentment around pay, sharing similar job tenures and employment status. So what's, the question is, okay, what's the big takeaway here? How is this study really helping veterans either interested in joining facility management or advancing and growing their career once they're in it? And what we really identified from the study is that military veterans have been and continue to be a very small portion of new hires in facility management. So we may have thought that we were doing a really good job as an industry of attracting and recruiting from this sustainable pipeline of candidates who are coming out of the military every year, but we really are not, as an industry, we're not doing a very good job. And so there's a lot of opportunities to improve that. And so what we're finding is that veterans eventually make it into FM because we know they're a larger portion compared to the general industry, but they're coming through other areas after they've left the military and eventually working their way into FM. But we're missing a really great opportunity to help transition folks directly into the industry from military. The main issue impacting historically low hiring levels of military veterans in FM appears to be, and this is really what came out in the interview type sections that we were interviewing military experts, is that organizations are generally unaware of how best to support and attract potential candidates transitioning out of the military every year. So there just seems to be a lack of understanding or a lack of knowledge of that process, of how that works, and how organizations that are hiring facility managers can leverage that. And so organizations that understand the military to civilians transition process are much better positioned to attract veterans into their workforce. And it doesn't take a lot of necessarily time and effort and resources, just kind of have to understand how that process works. And then secondly, becoming aware of and engaging with well-established entities and programs can facilitate the development of military veterans as a primary sustainable recruitment source. So understanding the transition process and then becoming aware of and engaging in these entities that are already out there that support this transition. And so a couple of resources we definitely wanted to share is the military community of IFMA. So this is an association that's dedicated to bringing military affiliated community into FM, really helping to bridge that gap between military veterans with FM adjacent skills and organizations that are seeking those facility professionals. So there's a link here where you can find that site. IFMA is in the process of updating that website, providing a lot of great tools and resources for those that are interested in as employers in hiring military folks transitioning out of the military or military folks that are interested in joining FM. It's a really great resource. And I also wanted to highlight, this is something that came up again and again in our research, is the Skill Bridge program. So if you're not familiar with the Skill Bridge program, it's a program that actually allows service members the opportunity to work in the industry via apprenticeship or an internship. And it doesn't have to be technical, right? It can be a management level type role. So during their last days, the last 180 days of service, while they're still employed in the military, they can do those internships. The pay is being covered by the military while they're doing this. So, I mean, it's really a win-win, right? So those folks transitioning out of the military are getting industry-specific experience, and the employer is actually getting that service for free because the military is continuing to pay that salary. So really great program, really great potential for organizations interested in hiring military veterans to leverage this really critical resource. And there's some things that you have to do to make that happen. But there is the link to that program. I would highly encourage everyone to become familiar with that. It's a really great resource. There's a number of folks out there in the FM world that are leveraging this and having great success. So, Jake, I don't know if you have any other questions that have come up as we've been discussing, or any other thoughts you might have about this important community and how we can support that transition into FM employment.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get these questions pulled up. We actually have several questions coming in here, but my thoughts as you're going to go through and put your questions in the chat box here, folks. We'll certainly answer those. But I think one of the main things that we're going to think about here is that we have a lot of skills that we gain in the military, not just technical job skills, but communication skills. Having to communicate to senior commanders about a topic is certainly something that we have to do as a facilities professional in our day-to-day lives, right? Organization, timeliness. These are all important things from the military that we can transition these skills over to our professional practices as we go forward here. So, folks, as you put up your comments here, we got several questions and comments. One of the first ones we have here is, as an active duty sailor looking to transition out of the service soon, what are the skills employers are most excited about? How can I better market those skills? How can I grow my network? So I think a couple of thoughts here, and Steve, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts too. But I think one of the major things is from marketing your skills is be involved with an IFMA chapter. Go to the meetings, get involved on IFMA Engage, LinkedIn, and other folks as well is a really great opportunity to build some of those skills. Or excuse me, your network. In terms of skill sets, honestly, a lot of the big things that we learned in the military about simple communication, keep it straightforward, learn how to be on time about different things. These are really important from a skill set standpoint. Steve, I know you have a number of years of professional experience. When you think about skills that are needed in the FM function that military folks may have, what kind of comes to your mind from that standpoint?
Well, I'm not sure if I'll answer this directly, but what I'll say is being proactive is the key here, because as I mentioned, what we learned from this research is very few organizations that hire facility managers are actually aware of this process of how folks are transitioning out of the military into the industry. So if you're proactive with it and you're reaching out to some organizations that you are interested in working with, that's probably one of the best things you can do, and not necessarily wait and go through some formal channels, but don't hesitate to reach out to organizations directly. And as Dr. Smithwick mentioned, networking within IFMA, right? You can meet those folks. You can get emails and phone numbers and network and get the right people. So that's really, really important. Right, it just depends on the skills. It just depends on what type of role. If you're looking for more of a technical role versus more of a management role, I mean, that's going to vary as far as what organizations are going to be looking for specifically. So now that's some of those questions that you can probably ask the employer. But I'm confident that if you're being proactive, reaching out to those employers, you're going to have a lot of success because they're interested. Organizations are very interested. They just don't know how to bridge that gap. And I'm hoping this research will kind of highlight that challenge and we'll see some improvement. But be proactive.
Yeah, and that really goes to also what our comment from Dave Reynolds. Dave is one of our longtime friends and buddies. So Dave, it's great to see you here today. But Dave's comment is, as a culture note, veterans tend to bring an enterprise perspective brought about by military emphasis on mission as a universal responsibility. And members of any branch willingly speak of that mission of that branch. So this speaks to the perception and initiative in working FM, right? We all have missions, and Dave, that's a fantastic perspective, and we appreciate you bringing that to the forefront of this, right? Another comment we have here is how is IFMA recruiting veterans? So again, or I'm actually, how is IFMA supporting veterans? So there's the IFMA military community. I've talked with those folks. It's been a few years, but it's a fantastic group of people. There's going to be a new resource that'll be launched in the next week or two. So be sure to check that out. But I think as one of the biggest things that anybody, professional organization, IFMA or other folks, is to get involved with the association, right? I mean, if you were to show up to an IFMA chapter meeting and say, hey, I'm a military veteran, I want to know more about FM, my guess is that you'd be welcomed with arms wide open because this is a fantastic opportunity. And my advice is to just to engage with that going forward here, right?
Yeah, and I'll just add what I love about the International Facility Management Association is they're not just talking the talk. They're really walking the walk here, and this is evidence of that is this research or this study that was performed to say, hey, we know this is a really important recruitment really pipeline, a really important community for facility management, the future of facility management, and we want to better understand what's going on, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, and so You ask, what is IFMA doing? I mean, here's a wonderful example of what IFMA is doing. I'm not aware of any other organization that's trying to do their best. Now, IFMA is not the one that's actually recruiting or hiring, but they're trying to encourage, support, provide information, explore, so that their members that are out hiring are more aware of how they can better leverage this transition of military folks out of the military and into an FM job. So IFMA's really, I think, made it a priority.
Absolutely. And again, there's a QR code here. So if you want to download the free report, definitely scan that and you'll get access to it. It's also in the knowledge library, so be sure to check that out. Another question we've had come in is, what is the best way to post FM jobs to reach vets other than the IFMA job board? Does DoD have a central job board for transitioning military? The Skill Bridge program, Steve, right? That's a big resource to help kind of get the word out. I think just making connections. I know there's a number of military agencies that have locally supported events. There's local community organizations that are very connected with veterans. And I think as if you are in a recruiting position or an HR position and you're trying to find these people, then this is the type of thing that I would encourage folks to do, is go out, join the local military support communities and just say, hey, here's what we're looking to do. We want veterans, we want the transition FM, and here's all the resources that we have available. Steve, any other thoughts from your perspective on that?
Yes. So again, there is a gap here between, we know that organizations hiring facility managers are actually very interested in hiring veterans. They just don't quite know where to do it or how to do it. And then the flip side, we have a lot of military folks that are transitioning out of the military that are completely unaware of FM as a profession, even though they have a lot of adjacent skills that would be a great fit. And so, if I'm assuming this question is directed from, hey, if I'm a recruiter, I'm a business, how do I attract veterans into FM? As was mentioned, the Skill Bridge program is tremendous, but that does take a little bit of planning to get that in place. At minimum, I do believe there are some job boards that those jobs can be posted where veterans can look and check that. But again, as was mentioned, engaging in that military community and making folks aware of FM as a profession and that you are hiring. There's also it's very common to have job fairs. So the different branches will have job fairs specifically for those individuals that are transitioning out of the military. And so having a booth, just making yourself aware of and present to that community is really important. So there's a couple things that can be done.
Absolutely. Well, folks, don't forget to put your questions and comments. We have a couple more minutes here. One question I see coming across is, how do we get access to the report? So again, scan the QR code or click on the link in the knowledge library. You'll have to log in with your IFMA information, but that's the best place to get that. But any final thoughts or questions as we put into here? Be sure to connect with Dr. Call and I on LinkedIn. We both track that and watch that and share things. IFMA also has a very active LinkedIn channel and other social media channels, so be sure to do that. But final call for any other questions or comments here.
And as those last questions come in, I'll just say yes. If anybody has questions about the report, if they want to maybe understand, how they can be a part of this movement to leverage this important military community, please reach out to Dr. Smithwick or myself. We'd be happy to speak with you and help where we can.
Awesome. All right, folks. Well, again, on behalf of IFMA and Dr. Call and myself, we sincerely appreciate you being here today. This has been a fantastic project. There's many more research projects in the pipeline, and we're looking forward to expanding on mentorship in FM, benchmarking, other resources as well. So it's going to be a very active year. So keep your eyes out. Folks, we appreciate your time, your efforts, and your energy. We will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye.